Hello viewers and welcome to our top-notch programs. I am your presenter Oyuga Z Omolo. We have been discussing the set books for quite a while, and I believe that our presentations have helped you a great deal. We still continue to demystify the set books. And the set books that we have been discussing so far are Fathers of Nations, the Samaritan, the Silent Song. And our discussions, from your comments, we've realized that we are doing a good job, and you also appreciate what we do. And we want to thank you and continue to invite you to our programs. I've been talking about examination of English Paper 2. I had started talking about the excerpt and what you're supposed to do with the questions that come from the excerpt. Of course, we are now aware that excerpts come from compulsory set books. In this particular program, my discussion will revolve around comprehension, which is question 1 of the English Paper 2. We started with the title of the paper, and I said that the paper is titled Comprehension, Literary Appreciation, and Grammar. I had started a discussion on the part of the literary appreciation, which I said is 45 marks. The first 25 marks is for the compulsory set book, and it comes in terms of the excerpt. So let me now move to comprehension and share with you a bit of some tidbits of what you really need to do when you are handling comprehension. Now, comprehension means understanding from reading. That is a simple definition that I can give. You understand information that you have read. And that is what comprehension is about. Now, in this particular question, the testing is usually on the 3 skills. Skill number 1 is a skill of reading. Skill number 2 is a skill of comprehension. And the third skill is writing. That means a student is expected to read, understand, and write information from what is read, understood, and now is written. So that is the basics, or the basic skills that is required and tested when it comes to comprehension. Number 2 is that we have 3 levels of reading. Level number 1 is called scanning. Level number 2 is called skimming. And level number 3 is called intensive reading. But let me begin from skimming, then I will go to scanning, and finally intensive reading. Now, skimming is your first reading. You read through the comprehension or the passage to get the general information. Probably after you've read the text, maybe you realize that this passage is about COVID-19. So you get that information from your first reading, which is called skimming. Maybe you read through the passage and the message is HIV/AIDS. It could be women and technology. It could be diabetes. It could be high blood pressure. So that one information that you get from reading through the passage is what we call the skimming. You skim to get the general information, or what we usually call the gist of the matter. Because any other information that is given is actually to support the gist. And the gist in this case becomes what you are really looking for when you're doing your skimming. And the second reading is scanning. Scanning now is a little more specific. You're looking for a specific information. And here, when you're reading, we would prefer that you go through the questions that have been given, like in question 1. Maybe you've been asked to explain some information. In question 3, maybe you've been asked to explain some information. So what do? You're supposed to use that question, which we usually call the task, to get the information. And you can even indicate the paragraph where you feel, after reading, that information will be found. So that is what we now call scanning. Scanning now, you're reading with the task in mind. You have the task, and so you're looking for information to answer that particular task, and that is what we call scanning. Now the last one is intensive reading. Intensive reading is more of scanning, but again it involves thorough reading now. It's not about maybe I will get this information from this paragraph, I will get this information from this paragraph. You are now reading through the text again, but the intention now is to understand every bit of the passage. So that one is called intensive reading. I will not take you through what I call the extensive reading, because this is where now you read some other information, supportive information that can be applied to the current information that you are reading. That is not for our case, because we are not expected to have extra information in the passage, and that is why we always are restricted to the passage, and the questions will be according to the passage, not according to any other information. So I wouldn't take you to what I call the intensive reading, because it is irrelevant in this matter. So that said, now how are the questions asked? I would want to take you through what I call the Bloom's taxonomy. This is something that we studied at the university, but now we realize that it is very applicable at the level of high school. But we don't teach Bloom's taxonomy to our students. This is the information that the teacher needs to have, and you can explain it in your own way to your students. Remember, the Bloom's taxonomy is about how people understand, and Bloom came up with a pyramid kind of, and in this pyramid, at the lower level of the pyramid, we have what we call the recall. So sometimes when you're setting examination, you must set in information that would require the candidate or the student just to recall information, and having recalled that information and written that information, then that is all. Number 2 level is comprehension. So there are those questions that must be for comprehension at the level of a bit lower understanding. It's not so much, but again, it is higher than the recall. Because the recall, I can give a question like, maybe it is in a passage that World War II began in 1938. Then the question asks, when did the First World War begin? So the candidate or the student is expected to get to the passage and say that the First World War began in 1938. That is just recall. The information is there, you bring it or you retrieve it and reflect it on the paper. That is recall. Now when it comes to comprehension, it requires some level of thinking a bit, and you have to think a bit. They can ask you probably a question like explain. You explain something, and you will have to get back to the passage and probably get the explanation for it. Then there is analysis. Questions that require you to analyze information. Also, we have application at the 4th level that requires you to apply information, where you can be asked in your opinion. That means now you are applying information. So when you are applying information, you are supposed to give us your own perspective. So when you get questions like in your own opinion, they could be questions that require you to deal with issues of application. Then we have questions on evaluation. Evaluation also requires some level of high level thinking, because are you able to evaluate information that you have been given, and you are able now to present your answers. And finally we have synthesis, where you can get to that higher level now, the highest level, where you can recall, comprehend, analyze, apply, evaluate, and finally now you synthesize the information so that that information becomes part of you. Questions on attitude, those are now questions on synthesis. Questions on tone, those are now questions on synthesis. So that is how actually we give the range of questions that are set. But remember that in the current situation of setting, recalls usually is given just around 2 marks. We have questions on comprehension around 3 marks, question on analysis around 3 marks, application around 3 marks, evaluation 3 marks, then synthesis is also around 3 marks. Remember, this question is 20 marks. So if you add 2 to 3, that is 5, 5 plus 3 is 8, 8 plus 3 is 11, 11 plus 3 is 14, 14 plus 3 is 17. And therefore, generally, that is how the paper is set. Then we also have 2 questions that are usually the questions touching on vocabulary. You'll be asked some questions that are according to the passage. What is the meaning of this word? So those are questions that are touching on vocabulary. So if you add the vocabulary plus the ones that I've given, you'll get a total of 19 marks. So you're asking me, this 1 mark, where does it, where do we put it? Or where do we place the 1 mark? Now this 1 mark, usually it can be about probably the title that you can give the passage, or sometimes it can be a question on grammar. You are asked a question on grammar, but that question has come from the passage. So that is how this paper is set. This is something that I've researched on for quite a while, and now I begin to understand how comprehension is done. So when you are testing comprehension, remember that always you must have what we call table of specification. In your table of specification, indicate how many marks the recall question would have, and I've given you a maximum of 2. Indicate what mark the comprehension questions would have, 3. Indicate the number of marks that will be given to analysis, application, evaluation, synthesis, and even grammar and even vocabulary here. Then the last bit of that table of specification should now be either the title of the passage, or you can talk about a grammar question that you will only award 1 mark. So generally, it is important to know, number 1, the skills that are tested in comprehension. Number 2, you have to know the levels of reading that I've given. The skills, as I said, are reading, comprehension, and writing. Now, 3 levels of reading are scanning, skimming, and intensive reading. But I've not talked about extensive reading because it doesn't apply to our comprehension or situation now. Then finally, we talk about how do we set comprehension. And if you have to set comprehension, you must have the table of specification, indicating that I will have recall question 2 marks, comprehension questions 3, analysis 3, application 3, evaluation 3, synthesis 3. I know someone can ask me, where do we put note form and summary writing? They belong to comprehension up to synthesis. So you can actually test note making or summary writing under that, and it will suffice. So our viewers, we want to thank you. I believe that this information that we have given helps you, especially when you are doing your testing of comprehension, and a better understanding and a better way of teaching comprehension in our classroom. Have a great day. I am your presenter, Oyuga Z. Omono.